This has been the honor in my life to work with the men and women behind me. Today it's about the heart of James Adroga and Joe, and the integrity of Ray Pfeiffer, and the courage of Lou Alvarez, and the tenacity of John Fiel. They lifted this 9/11 community on their shoulders, and they carried them home. And I will always be so proud to have been associated with it. And we can never repay all that the 9/11 community has done for our country, but we can stop penalizing them. And today is that day that they can exhale, because unfortunately the pain and suffering of what these heroes continue to go through is going to continue. There have been too many funerals, too many hospices. These families deserve better, and I'm hopeful that today begins the process of being able to heal without the burden of having to advocate.
This is a relief, Jon Stewart, in the moments after the 9/11 Victims' Compensation Fund passed the Senate 97-2, only weeks after the House passed the bill 402-12. There ended up being only 2 senators voting against the bill, Utah's Mike Lee and Kentucky's Rand Paul, both Republicans. Paul was responsible for blocking the bill when it came to the floor for a unanimous consent vote, when he claimed he couldn't possibly bring himself to vote for it without first offsetting costs.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object. It has long been my feeling that we need to address our massive debt in this country. We have a $22 trillion debt. We're adding debt at about $1 trillion a year. And therefore, any new spending that we are approaching, any new program that's going to have the longevity of 70, 80 years should be offset by cutting spending that's less valuable. We need to, at the very least, have this debate. I will be offering up an amendment if this bill should come to the floor, but until then, I will object.
And after his amendment to offset the cost of the VCF failed, he still voted no, tweeting, "While I support our heroic first responders, I can't in good conscience vote for legislation which, to my dismay, remains unfunded. We have nearly $1 trillion deficit and $22 trillion in debt. Spending is out of control." And in Rand Paul's defense, he's done that before. He did offer an amendment to pay for the GOP tax bill, for example, but when that amendment failed, he voted for the tax bill anyway, along with Mike Lee. And that bill was not so much about making sure that our 9/11 first responders, the people who ran into the rubble when everyone else was running away, got the funding for healthcare that they need to survive. No, that bill was to give corporations and the ultra-rich a tax cut. That bill was the one that Republicans promised would pay for itself before ultimately conceding that it wouldn't. That bill was the one that Republicans promised wouldn't lead to stock buybacks and executive salary raises before ultimately leading to exactly that. That bill was the one currently exploding our deficit. And yet still, Rand Paul and Mike Lee found it in themselves to shelve their fiscal responsibility just long enough to cast their yay votes, while failing to do so for this one. Guess those steadfast principles take a back seat when you stand to receive a tax break. Although if we're looking for places to stem federal spending, we might want to take a look at Rand Paul's home state of Kentucky, which, according to the most recent data available, was ranked the 5th highest state in which federal aid comprised the largest share of general revenue. In other words, Rand Paul is content to represent a state that's happy to reap the rest of the nation's tax dollars, but when he has the chance to pay it forward for a more than worthy cause, well, it's suddenly time to tighten those belts. So the next time that anyone on the right tries to claim, for whatever reason, that Democrats aren't patriotic and that Democrats are undermining the values of this country, bear in mind that the only people to vote against protecting the very lives of our 9/11 heroes were Republicans. So while Rand Paul and Mike Lee can tweet out platitudes on Twitter about hashtag never forgetting the first responders on 9/11, when it came time to put their money where their mouths are, they managed to forget about them after all.